Good late afternoon. The City Council will be meeting for closed session. Prior to the beginning of the regularly scheduled City Council meeting, we'll have the City Clerk take the roll, please.
Councilwoman Basua is absent for the moment. Councilmember Lopez, absent. Councilman McDonald?
Here.
Councilmember Madrigal, absent for the moment. Councilmember Perello? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez? Here. Mayor Flynn?
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum, and the agenda for this meeting was posted in the City Hall kiosk on Thursday, January 23rd.
Thank you very much. The City Council will recess to a closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 549569D1 to confer with its attorneys. The title of the litigation being discussed is the City of Port Hueneme versus City of Oxnard. Albino Gonzalez. The City Council will also recess to a closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8 to give instructions to its real property negotiators regarding item C3 of the meeting agenda. The City Council and the successor agency will recess to a closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1 to confer with its attorneys. The title of the litigation being discussed is the City of Oxnard versus California Director of Finance, Keely Martin Bossler. And, yes, Mr. City Attorney.
Mr. Mayor, should Council Member Lopez arrive, she will not be participating in item C1, City of Port Hueneme matter, because she has a relationship, a family relationship with the city employee that is co-defendant with the city in that case.
Thank you very much. And Madam City Clerk, we have no speaker cards, and the City Council will recess now for closed session, and we'll begin the regularly scheduled meeting at 6 p.m. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome. Sorry about that. Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled Oxnard City Council meeting. The date is February 4th, 2020, and the City Council just emerged from closed session, and the City Attorney has an announcement to make. Mr. City Attorney, please.
Thank you, Mayor Flynn. Reports out of closed session on the Port Hueneme versus City of Oxnard matter. Councilwoman Basua and Councilmember Lopez recused themselves, and Council was briefed on the status of this workers' compensation subrogation case and provided direction and settlement authority to legal counsel regarding an upcoming mediation in the matter. On the real property negotiation item, Council was briefed on the status of negotiations for the potential lease of city property with the listed entity and provided direction to the city's negotiator. If a lease is negotiated, it will be agendized for council action at open session. And in the matter of the city and successor agency versus the California Director of Finance and the Department of Finance, by a unanimous vote with Councilmember Madrigal being absent, the City Council and successor agency approved settling litigation the city and successor agency filed in October of last year regarding disposition of housing funds resulting from refinancing of the Camino del Sol senior apartments. The settlement will permit the successor agency to transfer the full amount at issue, $1.5 million, to the city as successor housing entity to use for affordable housing purposes.
Thank you very much. And we'll have the City Clerk take the roll, please.
Councilwoman Basua?
Here.
Councilmember Lopez? Here. Councilman McDonald?
Here.
Councilmember Madrigal is absent. Councilmember Perlo? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez?
Here.
Mayor Flynn?
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum, and the agenda for this meeting was posted in the City Hall kiosk on Thursday, January 23rd.
Thank you very much. And as is the tradition here at the Oxnard City Council, after a pledge to the nation, we have a moment of silence. And we'll have, especially in our thoughts and prayers, our former mayor, Manuel Lopez, who passed away recently, as well as one of our police officers, Nathan Martin, who also passed away recently. So we'll have their families and the commitment of these two individuals in particular in our thoughts and prayers as we rise now for the pledge. Councilwoman Basua, can you lead us in the pledge, please?
Yes, please place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With the exception of the City Council, be seated, please. So this evening, ladies and gentlemen, we have one ceremonial item, and a very important one indeed. And that ceremonial item is the presentation of a proclamation designating the month of February 2020 as Black History Month. And we have a number of individuals that we'd like to call up now to the dais. And Regina Crawford, Julia Dixon, Angela Mitchell, Bruce Stewart, Shun Clark, Loretta Montgomery, and Marvis Graves, please. We give them a round of applause as they make their way up, please.
How are you? And nice to see you. Hey, how are you? Nice to see you. Hello. Hey there, how are you? Oh, goodness. A lot more.
we'll split out and double up. He's tall, so he can stand up behind us. Yeah.
So we have, ladies and gentlemen, this evening an extensive list of individuals, and each and every one of them is going to receive a proclamation. But before I say their names and the organizations that they represent, I'd like for Loretta Montgomery to say a few words. And in particular, she is in charge of the committee of the Ventura County Martin Luther King Jr. Annual event that just happened several weeks ago. And of course, a lot of planning, a lot of hard work by all of these individuals, and we very much appreciate their efforts. So we'll have Loretta just say a few words, please.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor, Council, Mayor Pro Tem, and all of my community people. It's so wonderful to be here this evening, and we thank the City of Oxnard for acknowledging. We, the Martin Luther King Committee of Ventura County, we just had a wonderful celebration, and we thank the city for all of your support as well.
Thank you very much. And what I'd like to do is just acknowledge once again the names here of those individuals that are going to be receiving this proclamation. And we have a number of them here. And the very first is, and we'll have the person just raise their hand when their name is called, Regina Crawford with the Ventura County chapter of NAACP. Thank you. Julia Dixon with the 20th Century Ungs Club, please. Angela Mitchell, the Juneteenth Celebration Committee of Ventura County. Bruce Stewart, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, please. LaShun Clark, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity. Oh, is it just sorority?
And it's LaShawn.
And LaShawn, I'm sorry, but how about the Alpha Phi? Nothing to do with the fraternity.
The sorority.
Well, somebody set me up on that one. Okay. Okay, I'll never do that. I'll never make that mistake again. Loretta Montgomery, again, Martin Luther King Jr. Committee of Ventura County. Marvis Graves, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, please. So what I'd like to do is read this proclamation, and then we'll be handing these proclamations out. Whereas the African Americans have a proud history and a rich heritage, Black History Month gives Americans an opportunity to learn more about the contributions of African Americans to our community and nation. Whereas we celebrate African Americans for their cultural, political, economic, and historical contributions to our country. Whereas African Americans have persevered, despite facing daunting challenges and indignities as a result of widespread racial prejudice and institutional discrimination. Whereas African Americans are recognized for their courage, tenacity, and contributions to our country as skilled workers, esteemed professionals, lawyers, pilots, inventors, educators, public officials, orators, publishers, physicians, athletes, small business owners, bankers, librarians, and much more to help create the status and wealth of the United States. Whereas in remembering the special role of our nation's most celebrated African Americans, we also commend the everyday African American heroes who are dedicated to the long-cherished ideals of family, community, and nation. These citizens who are proud of their heritage and proud of their country and know the value of hard work and sacrifice in establishing a good life, loving home, and safe community deserve and honor our recognition. And now, therefore, I, Tim Flynn, Mayor of the City of Oxnard, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2020 as Black History Month in the City of Oxnard, and encourage all residents to learn more about the contributions made to our community and nation by African Americans. And so I'd like to present this first and foremost to Rita and to the other recipients. Raise your hand if your name was called, because I probably should have handed them out right after I read your name. All right, so we go all over it again here. And there we go. Thank you. And also again. And here we go. And okay, sorry about that. Sorry. So we want to thank them for their contributions, and I don't think any one of these individuals gets paid a single dime for doing what they do. They do what they do because they care about this community, right? Yes. And we want to thank them, and we want to encourage them and others to join them in their efforts. So let's give them another round of applause, please.
There we go. That's a good one. A little closer. To get that thing up a little bit more.
And Lily,
Lily, yeah.
thank you very much. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much again. Thank you. Thank you very much again. Thank you. Thank you so much again. Thank you so much. Sure. That's all.
Okay, all right. And you see the city of Oxnard back here? Oh, there's Ron.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what we'll do now is go to item F on the agenda. This is on page 2 for those that are following. And this is public comments on items not on the agenda. At this time, the legislative body will consider public comments for a maximum of 30 minutes. A person may address the legislative body only on matters not appearing on the agenda and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. Speaker cards will not be accepted after the beginning of the general public comment period. Based on the number of speaker cards submitted, the presiding officer may impose time limits per speaker. Typically, speakers are limited to 3 minutes, but shorter times may be established as deemed necessary. A person not able to address the legislative body at this time because the 30 minutes expires may do so just prior to the adjournment of the meeting. The legislative body cannot enter into a detailed discussion or take any action on any items presented during public comments at this time. Such items may only be referred to the city manager for administrative action or scheduled on a subsequent agenda for discussions. Persons wishing to speak on public hearing items should do so at the time of the hearing. So I do have a number of speakers that have filled out speaker cards, and I'd ask anyone here in the audience who has not yet filled out a speaker card, if they'd like to speak on items not on the agenda, to please approach the city clerk now, fill out a speaker card, and you'll be called in the order in which your card was submitted. So if no one else here in the audience would like to speak, then we'll no longer be accepting the speaker cards. We'll call up the speakers in the order in which the cards were submitted. The very first speaker, P.W. Robinson, to be followed by Lawrence Paul Stein, please.
Okay, thank you. I hoped, and next time I come, I really want to talk about some really exciting and happy things that I'm working on. Paradise Project is one thing. That's a goal is to address homelessness aggressively.
Sir, if you could do me a favor, speak right into the microphone. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Sorry. Yeah, talking about the Paradise Project next time. Right now, we had a moment of silence earlier for a couple of folks. I'd like to have a moment of silence about Tabitha Boyd. September 13th of last year, Tabitha Boyd was, she's homeless. She was 37. She was walking up on Ventura Avenue. She was run over by a car. She was run over by another car. She was run over by another car. And she was run over by another car. Nobody stopped. Now, it made the news, made the 5th paragraph. They buried the lead in Ventura County Star. You can look that up. Tabitha Boyd's her name. I'd like a moment of silence for her. And that'll prepare us for the fact that, and this is known in this room, I know, this is not a newsflash here, but we have the highest homeless death rate in the nation. Anybody? 4.91%. If we had the same death rate for homeless people that they do in San Francisco last year, we would have had 28 dead people. We had 82. San Francisco, Los Angeles, the same. San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles, all within 1/10 of a percentage point, around the 1.67 mark. We're at 4.91 homeless death rate last year. Now, I know it's not a new thing. I don't even have to look because nobody exclaimed. I didn't even find that number out until I read the article of the memorial service. That means that the newspaper decides not to report this news. This is news. Do we agree that that's news? Highest death rate, Ventura County, privileged, mild weather, lowish crime, I don't know. Compared to a hardcore city like San Francisco, it's access, of course, more cameras in cities. You'll figure it out. I know what it is. I'm not even going to say it. But that's something that we should be addressing. I'm going to just yell about it. I'm making music videos and things like that, and talking about some things that I've experienced since being homeless, and one of those things is actions of the city of Oxnard. Still got the bathrooms locked. Good job, good job. Never unlock those bathrooms, whatever you do. Don't make it possible for homeless people to get by. Make it more difficult. And then we're going to have to talk about some of the things in that article, the vagrants article. But next time, I promise, all good news, all good stuff, Paradise Project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. The next speaker, Lawrence Paul Stein, to be followed by George Miller, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, staff, and most importantly, the citizens of Oxnard. As you're aware, the 40,000 plus residents and ratepayers of commercial and residential water are paying both a water fee for usage of water and a meter charge for the size of the pipeline. The purpose of the size of the pipeline fee is to cover the debt service and fixed costs of the water company. A large portion of the debt service is for the GREAT program. There are about 5 entities who are industrial users, particularly farmers, are using this GREAT water, but not paying the debt service on the AWTF or the 2010 water bonds. We 44,000 plus residents are paying the debt service for water we're not getting. We're not paying for water. We are paying for water we're not getting. And I'm disappointed with this because the citizens of Oxnard aren't coming to city council meetings to discuss the fact we're paying for water we're not getting, but we have hundreds of people who can't afford the water bill because they're paying for water they're not getting. On a separate issue, I wish to address the Parks Master Plan. I've asked numerous times for release of the Parks Master Plan. I was told that originally the Park Master Plan is going to be released in October. Why the city manager is withholding the Park Master Plan from the public and other people or interested parties is beyond my understanding. I've asked for release of this plan. We're told we're still working on it. We're working on the details. Well, they're holding the cards very tightly on what's on that plan, but I've had a sneak peek at a couple of those cards. And the staff has decided not to build an aquatic center at College Park. Staff has decided not to build ball fields at College Park. Both these items were approved by prior city council almost 20 years ago, probably close to 15 years ago if you consider all the meetings and past resolutions. But again, staff has taken upon themselves, not city council, nor direction from city council, but staff has decided to remove the aquatic center at College Park. There are 5 soccer fields at College Park right now. That was part of the Park Master Plan. Park Master Plan phases 1 and 2 were approved. We have soccer fields, we got basketball fields, we got a dog park, We got the skate park, we got all sorts of amenities. The aquatic center and ball field has been dropped by staff, not city council. Staff has decided to build the ball field at Sports Park. But we need $40 to $60 million to do all the park implementation, and staff has not determined where this is coming from. Staff is not making this information available to the public. City manager is not making this information available to the general public.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker, George Miller, to be followed by Jack Villa, please.
Good evening, council, staff, and public. Believe it or not, I've covered more Oxnard City Council meetings than any other active reporter in the world right now. I've seen a lot of good stuff. I've seen some stuff that's not so good. I'm here tonight, though, to talk about the opening for Ventura County Supervisor, District 5. There are 5 candidates running, and I'm advocating that the public vote for Jeffrey Burham because I think he has outstanding qualifications, a lot of skills that are not now present on the County Board of Supervisors. Now, you may ask, why am I not endorsing 2 very highly qualified candidates who presently work on the council? Well, although I think they're highly qualified and they've accomplished a lot, unfortunately the record of the last 10 to 14 years is not very exemplary. I do not want those failures brought over into the Board of Supervisors. I do not think that these people should be promoted to 6-figure jobs managing a $2 billion budget when they have failed miserably on the council. How have they failed? Well, we have chronic deficits, spending problems, crumbling infrastructure, mounting crime, mounting homelessness. I can go through a long list, which I've done before, but I would heartily urge the public to take a good hard look, if not at Jeffrey Burham, at least at Jess Herrera, who's also qualified as well. Finally, I want to talk about the disgrace that the city has done in harassing elected treasurer Phil Molina. It's come to my attention that his city email has been blocked, not by Russian hackers, but by the city manager's office. I understand also that he's been physically ejected from his office in the City Hall, and he's been banished across the street, I guess someplace within this area pretty closely. I understand he's also been blocked from accessing the computer data that he needs to do his job. Now, the pretext for this is a phony harassment charge, which has passed the statute of when it should have been acted upon. I don't know what the hell you people are doing, and your feud with the city treasurer, who's trying to enact better transparency, is something that's been longstanding, but your behavior is completely unacceptable. Finally, I want to point out the stealth 3-card Monte job that you folks did with Aaron Starr's term limits. I know you were opposed to them, yet you voted them into law at the last city council meeting. Why did you do that? So no one would know that they were passed, and they would see a term limits bill in Measure B, which I recommend voting against, and vote for that thinking, oh, term limits, but what you really be doing is you'd be superseding and replacing it with watered-down term limits that the council has done to protect their incumbency. Thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you very much. Jack Villa, to be followed by Pat Brown, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Jack Villa. I'm the Interneighborhood Council Organization Chair, and I've come to announce that tomorrow, 7 o'clock here in Council Chambers, the INCO will be holding a candidates forum for the Ventura County supervisorial seats 1, 3, and 5. We'll also have a section in the forum for Measure B as well. So we encourage people to be watching it or come and ask questions. Thank you.
7 p.m.
7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Pat Brown, to be followed by Al Velasquez, please.
When I turned in my card to speak on items and on the agenda, I didn't realize there were going to be 2 people ahead of me that were also going to be speaking about the candidate forum that's tomorrow night, right here in City Hall, right here in City Council chambers. This is being put together by the neighborhood councils of Oxnard. I would suggest that since it's at 7 o'clock tomorrow night, you have plenty of time to get home and have dinner. It's not like having to come here at 6 o'clock. And secondly, you can ask questions. And if you are a neighborhood chair, but you don't come to the INCO meetings very often, this would be a good time to come, to be here. And I would expect this whole room to be full of residents who have all kinds of questions about Measure B and want to hear about the supervisorial candidates who are going to be running for office. I've also heard on several programs on the radio and on TV recently about people being concerned about not being able to vote because they haven't voted recently, or they moved and they have a new address, or they're new in town, or, you know, I mean, there's a number of reasons. But guess what? In the state of California, you can still go to the poll and vote, regardless of whether you are noticed ahead of time or not. They can still go and vote. And I am sure that the city of Oxnard would love them to come to a polling place, maybe not their own, but a polling place and vote, even if they haven't registered to vote, even if they've just decided to do this at the last minute, it's still okay, because we want everybody who is capable of voting this year to vote, not only in the general election, but also in the primary. It's very, very important. And as if you come on tomorrow night, you will hear more about this. So I would recommend that everybody that's watching this on television and is in the chambers now, please come to the INCO Neighborhood Forum tomorrow night here at 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Al Velasquez, please.
A good 3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Wow. Anyway, good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff. I first want to thank George Miller for showing up tonight and touching on what my discussion was with him earlier today. But first of all, I just want to begin by saying I'm here this evening to ask you and the city manager, why is my duly elected city treasurer, Phil Molina, being treated even though he has contracted the coronavirus and is being isolated, disrespected, and belittled? I say this because this morning I called the city treasurer's office and I was told the city treasurer, Phil Molina, was no longer allowed in the city treasurer's office or in the building. Our duly elected city treasurer, my city treasurer that we voted for. I was told that he was moved per the city manager's orders to across the street in the upper floor of the building. I also found out that our elected city treasurer was also denied and blocked access to the utility building and business licensing computer modem. Now, you know what he did when he did that? I'll explain it in a minute. Now, my question is, why did the city manager take away the duties of the elected city treasurer in charge of the utility building and business license? Now, please note, the city treasurer needs to have access to all utility bills in order to verify if they are valid and accurate before dispersing funds for payment in the form of wire transfer or warrant checks. What that simply means is, how can the city treasurer disperse $1 million to $2 million when he can't verify if that's a valid bill. He has to verify the vouchers or receipts. It's that simple. By doing this, you have stifled him. He can't do that. He can't find out if somebody has paid the water bill, if somebody owes the city $2 million, $4 million in overdue payment for water usage. See, are you trying to hide that? So in closing, is a city council or city manager trying to hide some wrongdoings, or does city manager have a personal conflict with the city treasurer, or does he have a personal vendetta towards our city treasurer, Mr. Phil Molina? We cannot allow this to happen. Mr. Molina is a duly elected official who has fiduciary duties, and no city manager should deny him to fulfill his obligation.
Thank you very much. And that concludes the speakers on items not on the agenda. And now we'll go to the city manager's report. Mr. Nguyen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few announcements, but I need to make a brief response to some of the public speakers. With regard to Mr. Stein's comments about the Parks Master Plan, I'm impressed that he's gotten a peek at it. I have not. I understand that it's working its way through the Parks Commission right now, through, I believe, one of their ad hoc committees, and eventually it would get to the full Parks Commission, and then eventually it'll come to this body for the actual decisions, and whatever recommendations staff may or may not make, it's still up to this council to deliberate and make decisions. With regard to the two public speakers commenting about the situation with our elected city treasurer, Mr. Phil Molina, at this point, given that it's not an agendized item, all I can say is they are wholly incorrect about the information they've been provided. And in due time, I will be happy to bring a report on the agenda to discuss this issue publicly. Now, with that, I do have a couple of quick announcements. One, of course, is the ongoing ramping up towards the 2020 census. And there's a slide on the screen about the census jobs. They're available, continue to be so, and you can find information at 2020 for 2020 census.gov/jobs. There is also a census event this Saturday. It's the Ventura County Census 2020. This is a Ventura County Region 5 faith-based organizations subcommittee is being held here in Oxnard at Revive Community Church. And again, that's this Saturday in the morning at 10 a.m. It's scheduled from 10 a.m. till noon. Revive Community Church, and that's at 2640 Alvarado Street here in Oxnard. One more announcement is we, the city, our housing staff, are holding a community town hall meeting on February 11th at 6 p.m. at the main library about the, to work on the getting consensus in the design, development, and operation of the new Oxnard Navigation Center, which we are looking to locate at 241 West 2nd Street. That's here downtown. So this is a community town hall meeting to discuss the proposed navigation center at 241 2nd Street. Again, this meeting is scheduled for February 11 at 6 p.m. in the main library in meeting room B. B as in boy. And the main library is at 251 South A Street, downtown Oxnard. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we'll go to individual council member comments. And I presume that all council members want to give a report, so we'll start with Council Member Lopez, please.
Great, thank you. I want to start off, I know that we had our moment of silence for two very valuable individuals of this community, but I do want to express my my condolences and sharing some strength with all those that worked with and were familiar with Officer Nathan Martin, especially in the police department, and the students at Hueneme High School who seem to have been very touched by this loss that we're all feeling, as well as to the family of Dr. Manuel Lopez for his presence and leadership in this community. With that also, last week I did participate in the annual point-in-time homeless count, so I do want to acknowledge our housing director, Emilio Ramirez, for his work on that, and I do look forward to seeing the results. And thank you to all those out there who did participate and spent a couple of hours, early hours, walking throughout our city, really getting to know and hearing directly from individuals who are living out in our streets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Perillo.
I'd like to thank all the public speakers. Also, my condolences to the Martin and the Lopez family. But I would also like to take a moment to announce my deep feelings for a professional news person, Jim Lair, the originator of PBS The NewsHour with Mr. McNeil. But the NewsHour, the PBS NewsHour, is one of the highest ranking, in my opinion, quality news organizations. It leaves a lot for all current news organizations to shoot for. In my opinion, national broadcast news has fallen down from what it should be. I've had the opportunity over this last meeting to attend the Channel Islands Neighborhood Council, the Oxnard Shores, and the presentations were made by the city staff with respect to what is going on and what the hopes are for the future. Also attended the Harrington School with Councilmember Lopez. Was extremely good crowd, good audience. People paid attention. And ladies and gentlemen, when this comes into your neighborhood, I recommend you show up. I can tell you the best telltale for this type of a presentation, people don't leave in the middle. They stay till the bitter end. They want to hear all the information. I would also like to express something, spending a little more time in my neighborhood, in my district, District 1, down by the beach. I had an opportunity, someone suggested going to a restaurant called Salt. I'd never heard of it, and it's been in business for a long time on Woolley Road. I recommend you go. It was a terrific restaurant on Woolley Road. I didn't even know it was there. So I feel extremely ignorant and embarrassed that I didn't know it there, but I want a shout out. If you've never been, you ought to try it. There's some excellent places in the city of Oxnard, not just in District 1, but this is a good place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councilman McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week I was able to go down to the thriving metropolis of Irwindale. Spent the morning at a government advisory panel in Southern California on behalf of the city of Oxnard for Southern California Edison. I think it's going to be an interesting opportunity. A lot of good information came out of this, a lot of grant opportunities where Edison is looking to taking us in the future with renewables and other things. And it will give all of us in the service area of Southern California Edison a voice at the table about a variety of things, including public safety power shutoffs and things of that nature that directly affect all of our communities. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to continue there. We anticipate 4 meetings a year. Hopefully some of them will be a little bit closer to home, but as the effort progresses, I will keep council and the community informed. So, and I will echo the condolences to the Martin and the Lopez families also. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I want to give some details about the funeral for Dr. Lopez, but perhaps we could have someone give details about Officer Martin's funeral, which I believe is the public is invited. Is that correct? Who could do that? Okay, we'll do that in a minute. Dr. Lopez, as you know, was a very beloved person in our city. He has, his funeral will be next Friday the 14th, Valentine's Day, at Santa Clara Church at 10 o'clock in the morning. There will be a reception following at the public library right here, downtown Oxnard. Dr. Lopez loved the library and was instrumental in getting it built where it is today. And his family asked for donations to Oxnard Friends of the Library Foundation in lieu of flowers. And you're welcome. Everyone is welcome to come, and that would really comfort the family that people remember him and give condolences to the family. I also want to say that it just seems impossible that we lost Officer Martin. I can remember watching him in the back of the room so many times, keeping us safe, warm and friendly presence, like our police officers always are, welcoming, and I still remember his smile. So that's very painful. Finally, I want to thank and recognize the City of Ventura opening their 55-bed shelter, and that's very helpful to all of us because it does relieve some of the pressure. But just think, 100 beds in Oxnard, 55 beds in Ventura. It's very helpful, but we need so much more. I understand our city is looking for churches to find a way to be open during foul weather. Right now it's very cold outside, and you can imagine what it'd be like to be outside in the cold. It's not Chicago, it's not Washington, D.C., but here in Oxnard, it feels very cold. So we're looking for people to open their hearts and their churches. So do you have some information, City Manager?
Yes, if I
Thank
may.
you.
So the memorial service for Officer Nathan Martin will be held this Friday, February 7th at 11 a.m. The service will be at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The address is 1201 Paseo Camarillo in Camarillo. Immediately following the service, there will be a graveside service at Conejo Mountain Memorial Park, which is at 2052 Howard Road in Camarillo. Parking will be limited, so the family encourages carpooling as much as possible. So again, it's this Friday at 11 a.m. Please get there early. Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, 1201 Paseo Camarillo in the city of Camarillo. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Basua.
Thank you. I also would like to give my condolences to the Lopez family and the Martin family. Thoughts and prayers are with both families at this time. I would also like to let the public know that on February 15th, Saturday, February 15th, there is going to be a cleanup at Ormond Beach. Those people that are interested can meet at the entrance of Ormond Beach Preserve at 301 McWayne Boulevard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would just like to call up the housing director just for a second, please. And because we have city council meetings only every 2 weeks, I like to give the public an update on the highlights. And unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to meet with you since our last council meeting on regarding this topic. And I just wanted you to maybe go over just a couple of the developments or highlights. And the city manager actually touched on one of them, which had to do with the shelter.
Thank you, sir. Emilio Ramirez, Housing Director. I guess first is the town hall meeting that I know Alex already spoke about. We are active in producing a modern state-of-the-art navigation center. In this case, mixed use, ground floor navigation, shelter, supportive services offices, recuperative care, case management, and permanent supportive housing. I think part of what you had asked, Mayor, for us to identify is along the way points of success and milestones that we witness, and we do in fact witness quite a bit of points of success. And I'd like to mention that, but before I do that, there was a public speaker earlier that was talking about homeless individuals that pass away on the street. It happens more often than any of us would feel comfortable. Every time something happens like that that I know personally, I post something on social media. A very good friend of mine died yesterday on the streets. He was from Oxnard. He lives in LA. He lived in LA. So I wanted to mention that. But there was also a acknowledgement that I wanted to offer for two businesses that are in town, Embassy Suites and Gold's Gym. They are going to be hosting a job fair at the homeless shelter, seeking to employ people that are recovering from their trauma. They have 6 positions at Gold's Gym and 11 at the Embassy Suites, and they're looking to recruit specifically from the shelter. That's occurring on the 27th, I believe. I'll make sure that you have more information as we go forward.
Thank you very much for those highlights, and certainly some very positive news. So congratulations on your efforts and that of the city manager and the staff.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Okay, now we'll go ahead on the agenda. We're still on page 2, and we'll go to item K, which is the information consent agenda, and we'll ask members of the City Council if they'd like to pull any of those items for discussion, and I'd ask that you use the parliamentarian to indicate if there are those that you would like to, if you'd like to tell me what those are so we can get through those before we proceed. Councilmember Lopez.
I have a question about K5 and K6.
K5 and K6, okay. And with no additional ones, why don't we go with K5, please?
All right, so I have a question to clarify on the amount, the appropriation in both items, similar question, what the appropriation is and what the contract amount is and what why there's a different number.
Tatiana Arnaud, City Engineer with Public Works. So the difference is just that we already have some funds already in the project, so we're just asking for additional appropriation to cover the costs for the rest of the contract.
Okay, thank you. And then another question about between the two items, how are they broken down by the streets or the intersections that will that are part of them? So how is that assignment done?
So there's usually a study that's performed to assess what corridors we should be focusing on for these types of improvements, and then we prioritize that way.
Okay, thank you.
And Councilmember Lopez, item 6, I believe.
Sorry, it was similar questions for both items. So.
Okay, very well. Okay, and with no further questions by members of the council, all right, and...
I'll move the recommended action.
Oh, let me just make sure we don't have speaker cards on that. We do have one. Pat Brown, please.
I frequently end up on Oxnard Boulevard in the downtown area driving during the week, during the day. And there are many times, especially around lunch and right after lunch, Oxnard Boulevard is just jammed, going both north and south. And you might have to wait twice through a signal to get moving. It gets really, really frustrating. It's even more frustrating when people are obviously, when the light changes and they're just sitting there because they're probably on their cell phones. And they probably think, oh, it's okay. Well, it's not okay, because the longer they sit there after they got a green light, slows up all of the traffic behind them and makes them have to wait 2 or 3 signals around to get through one intersection. It just makes it really, really frustrating. And also, the train that comes through the 5 Points intersection with all that loud honking is about enough to drive everybody that's near there, such as me, crazy. And I would prefer that we do something about that, but I don't know what we can possibly do. It seems like there's more and more and more trains coming through the 5 Points intersection. Somebody must think that's exciting and good, but it's extremely noisy, and they honk way too much. The signals are already blinking, they're already telling them to stay put and whatnot. A few honks is fine, but just continuously, it just about drives people crazy. Then the other item that's on number 5, on number 6, traffic signal modification project. I hope that this will modify enough so that we don't have to stop so much. I note that when I leave here at night, after, say, 8 or 9 o'clock, the traffic, there's no traffic, but the signals are spaced so that you get green lights all the way through. But during the day, it's probably set the same way, but the traffic stack-ups at each signal in the downtown area about screw everything up. And so somehow or other, it's got to be able to be flexed depending on the traffic at the particular time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that concludes the
Mayor.
speakers. Yes.
Just a quick comment on the trains. I've asked the Transportation and Public Works Committee to look at a thing called quiet zones. And there's an ability under state and federal law to establish a quiet zone where trains are not necessarily required to honk if we can meet certain standards. So hopefully that'll be coming back to a Public Works and Transportation Committee soon.
Very well. Thank you very much. And Mayor Pro Tem has made a motion to pass the information consent agenda. Do we have a second, please? Second. All right. So we have, Madam City Clerk, a motion by Mayor Pro Tem and a second by Councilman Perrello. The vote, please.
Mayor, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much. And now we'll go to page 5 of the agenda. And page 5 of the agenda, item L under public hearings, under the Community Development Department. And this particular item is a request for a continuance to a date uncertain. And so, Mr. Fisher, we have to vote on that, or do we, when we vote, is it only for a date certain?
It will be rescheduled, so to the extent that you're being asked to not hold the public hearing tonight, then you can go ahead and approve that, but you don't need to make any reference to what the date will be. It'll be renoticed. The public will have that published notice. It'll be advertised.
Okay, so the recommendation again is that the council continue the appeal hearing for the planning zoning permit number 18-500-12, an SUP for a property located at 2900 Saviors Road to a date uncertain. What's the desire of the council? Do we have a motion to approve?
Mayor?
Yes.
Since we didn't offer people an opportunity to speak at items not on the agenda under this item, I don't know if there's anybody who wanted to speak on it. Maybe we want to check and see if there's any speakers.
Are there any speakers on the item? Okay.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right, very well. All right, what's the desire of the council on this item? We just need a motion to continue. All right, all in favor? All opposed? All right, so it carries. And do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Mayor Pro Tem. All right, very well. So that item. Now we'll go to item 2, which is under the Community Development Department. And again, we're under L, public hearings, on page 5 of the agenda. Subject, Rio Urbana Development Project located at 2714 East Vineyard Avenue, consisting of 15,000 square feet of office building and a 167 for-sale residential units over 9 individual buildings, filed by Rio School District and the Pacific Companies. The recommendation is that the City Council, number 1, conduct a public hearing. Number 2, adopt a resolution adapting Mitigated Negative Declaration, M&D 2017-04, authorizing proceeding with the annexation of parcel number 17-610-01, annexation, subject to approval of tax sharing agreement, and approving 17-620-01, general plan amendment to change the land use designation from school to commercial general and to add the project site to the El Rio West neighborhood, subject to certain findings and conditions. 3, adopt a resolution adopting PZ number 17-300-03, tentative subdivision map for tract number 5998, and 17-535-02, density bonus, subject to certain findings and conditions. Number 4, introduce an ordinance by title only waiving future reading, approving PZ number 17-560-01, pre-zoning to general commercial plan development, C2 PD. And 5, authorize city staff to negotiate with the County of Ventura a project-specific tax share agreement. And before we have the presentation, we'll ask the city clerk to provide for affidavit of publication and written communications, if any.
Thank you, Mayor. There was a legal notice for this public hearing published in Vita newspaper on January the 23rd. The city clerk's office has received one written communication for this item, which the council members all have copies of, and then there's also a copy for public review here in the binder.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jeff Lambert, Community Development Director. I'll be brief. I just want to introduce this item. I will turn it over to Scott Colwitz, our planning manager, to do the bulk of the presentation. I just wanted to set the stage that the council might remember this project started in 2015 with a pre-application before the city council. That's a first step in a process that requires a general plan amendment and zone change. The council had a few comments which we'll cover in the presentation. I believe the applicant has really worked through and addressed the issues raised by the city council, and that also that this project has been sort of duly evaluated by the Planning Commission and comes to you with a recommendation of approval by your Planning Commission. With that, I'll turn it over to Scott Colwitz. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Mayor Flynn, Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez, members of the council, thank you for having us tonight. So the project that we have before us, Jeff is right, it's been with us in one iteration of another since 2015. I've got 18 slides to take you through to bring you through that history as quickly as possible. So please bear with me. We have some pictures in here to show you what the project is. But ultimately, your actions that we're asking you to approve tonight are the annexation, the general plan amendment, the pre-zoning, the tentative subdivision map, the density bonus, authorizing the MND, and ultimately authorizing the city to engage with the county regarding the tax sharing agreement. So to that effect, the project before us, it's for a 10.24 acre piece of property. The property itself, it's located immediately adjacent to the El Rio West neighborhood, co-terminus with the city's boundaries, about 1,000 feet north of the 101 interchange at Vineyard. The project itself, it's bordered by, on the west side and the north side, residential developments. And on the south side, we have various commercial uses. And immediately to the east of the property, there's an agricultural piece of property currently in the county that has a designation on it to allow affordable housing and other residential development there. So this is a continuation of urban development that the city's general plan forecasted as part of our sphere of influence in the general plan land use designations found within. And as we look at what is actually proposed, the Planning Commission, they got down into the details of the project and have already approved 2 special use permits regarding the actual physical development. So that part of the development, the actual physical development, is not before you, but I want to share with you what they've approved subject to both your approval as well as LAFCO's approval of bringing this into the city. So the residential component are the buildings in yellow. It consists of 9 different buildings, 3 stories high, with 167 total residential units in it. In addition, there's 1 orange building, which is a 15,000 square foot office building. This property, it's completely consistent with the parking regulations that the city has. It is compliant with all the standards for the R3 zone or the C2 zone, with the exception of a few items that they're allowed to get some administrative waivers, if you will, through our density bonus provisions, as well as other provisions within our municipal code. In particular, the density bonus regulations that they're utilizing would have allowed them to exceed our density on the site by a total of 20%, but the applicant is only looking for a few percentage points above what they otherwise would be allowed. In addition, they requested that they be given a slight allowance on height over what we're allowed. Instead of 35 feet for our maximum height of our buildings, they're looking at 36 to 38 feet. It's, as you look at each building, the buildings were identified as being consistent if you measured it from grade, but the height is measured from the point of the right-of-way, and as you go further west, the slope drops, so the height of those the slope raises, so the height appears larger on paper, but not in real life. There's a couple, 5 total parking spaces that are slightly further than what our municipal code allows. They're supposed to be within 85 feet of all residential units, and there's 5 that don't quite hit that. They're just a little bit further out from that. And the amount of open space, looking at it from this perspective, it looks quite full, but they're a couple percentage points off of what our required open space requirements are on the property. But our density bonus provisions and our administrative waiver provisions allow them not to meet all of those on the project site. Architecturally, this is the office building that's been proposed up at Vineyard. So this will be anchoring the corner at the southwest corner of the property. And then the residential development will have this look as you go through the entire development. And as you can see in this picture, the landscaping, it's quite full on the property itself. A little bit of background without belaboring the point. This has been through quite a robust process. Starting back in 2015, it did become before the City Council for a pre-application. The council identified a whole number of issues. These 5 in particular were the ones that you asked the applicant team to go back and study. So adequacy of parking and traffic are reoccurring themes that would have been heard from this point forward in this application's life. The applicant heard those and tried to modify the projects to accommodate for those. In 2017, the project had been revised slightly. Rather than 228 units, which is 60 or so, 61 more than what's being proposed today, they cut it back to 182 condominium units, which is 15 more than what's being proposed today. The trade-off that they had at that point in time was adding the office building. And then again, in May 2019, they reduced the project a little bit more, down to 167 units, and that is ultimately the project that the Planning Commission approved. Again, the project today does meet all the parking requirements that we have in our municipal code. In addition to coming before the City Council and the Planning Commission, this project was also shared with one of our community councils, the El Rio West Community Council. And in addition, the applicant brought the project to the El Rio del Norte Municipal Advisory Committee over our council over in the council to make sure that we are engaging both organizations within the city as outside of the city as we look to bring them in. You'll see that the questions that were raised at that point in time are very similar to the questions that the council had pointed out. The applicant went through the process of trying to address those. City staff analyzed those through our environmental documents. And ultimately, the Planning Commission took all those documents and did the heavy lifting. They reviewed the project on 2 separate occasions, first on October 3rd, later again on November 21st. They directed the applicant away with some questions. And the conclusion at the end of November 21st was a unanimous approval, but the Planning Commission was able to do a couple of things that I wanted to share with you. They increased the number of affordable units that were originally proposed. It came into the hearing process with the Planning Commission with a total of 17 affordable units. It ended up leaving that process with a total of 20 affordable units. In addition to that, the Planning Commission, as they were looking at the site plan, and I'll go back a couple of pages here. Oops. They asked and the pointer I don't have, there we go. The Planning Commission was looking for a pedestrian connection down in this portion of the property to allow their residents to go directly from the site to the Vallarta Shopping Center, so they didn't have to go all the way out to the street and then back through a parking lot to get to the shopping center. The applicant has engaged with the Vallarta Shopping owners to go ahead and formalize that document. It is a condition of approval in the Planning Commission's approvals. But jumping back forward to us today, the Planning Commission ultimately gave a unanimous approval in terms of the mitigated negative declaration as being adequate. They approved 2 special use permits, one approving the office use, the other one approving the residential use, and forward a recommendation to the City Council unanimously to approve the annexation, the pre-zones, the map, the density bonuses, and so on. This is, again, a summary of what the Planning Commission approval resulted in. If we need to come back and look at the specifics of the environmental document, we can. I will summarize this slide to say it was robust. There were 17 different topics that CEQA demands that we look at. 9 special studies were prepared for the mitigated negative declaration. Parking and traffic were the big discussion points as we went through the process. The summary conclusion that staff will have for you is ultimately the project is consistent with the thresholds that we have adopted in terms of how our traffic and how our parking is supposed to meet and operate. Since we like graphics, we have a couple pictures to simply show what is going to occur with this one. So again, the annexation, it's bringing a piece of property that's currently within the curb boundaries, meaning that to annex it, we don't need to go to a vote of the people. This is something the City Council and LAFCO has the authority to move forward with. We would be looking to annex this piece of property into the city. The general plan would change the current land use designation from school to commercial general. The commercial general land use designation does allow the office use as well as the residential use that's currently proposed. We would amend another graphic within our general plan to formally include this within the El Rio West neighborhood. I'll try to wrap up here. And in addition, we would be adding this to Council District Number 2, that's Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez's district, as we bring this into the city. The tentative subdivision map and density bonus, again, the applicant is getting a slight increase in the number of units that could be provided, but they are providing a total of 20 units, affordable units altogether. It's a project that has all the parking that's required and pretty good permeability and access to both the public right-of-way and the Vallarta Shopping Center directly to the south. The property is also being pre-zoned to C2 PD, which again allows what they are proposing on the site. And in terms of financial impacts to the city, this project would be required to pay all the development impact fees that we would expect of any development coming into the city. The applicant will be the one paying for us to process this application through LAFCO's process. So that is, those are not dollars coming out of the general fund. And then when the project is ultimately constructed and operational, those tax dollars will be coming into the city coffers and partially to the county as part of the tax sharing agreement. So if approved tonight by the City Council, we're not quite over the finish line because we still need to engage with LAFCO, the local agency commission. LAFCO has told us that they will not proceed with processing the application, though, until such time that the tax sharing agreement is approved by both the City Council as well as the Board of Supervisors. So that's why we're looking for authorization from the City Council to go ahead and negotiate that. And ultimately, there's some district initiatives that need to occur to make sure that we're getting them into the right ones in terms of utilities. So with that, the recommendation has already been shared in terms of the specifics. I'll leave this up on the screen, and we are available if you have any questions. Jeff is here with me, and I failed to introduce Dr. Chris Williamson is here as well with us. He's been the project planner throughout the start of this project through today. So if we need to get into the weeds of it, he's here for us as well. So with that, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll say first and foremost that this is a public hearing. If any member of the public would like to speak, please fill out a speaker card, hand it to the city clerk, and you'll be called in the order in which your speaker card was submitted. So I'd like to open up the public testimony portion of this public hearing and call on the following that have now submitted speaker cards or have already submitted speaker cards. Kevin White, to be followed by Tony Telemonte, please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Kevin White. I own a lot directly across the street from this proposed development. My major concern was the parking. I had been told the parking was going to be above, it was not going to meet density requirements. So if it is true that it's going to meet density requirements, because where I live now, there's a condo association across the street from me that was given waivers on this, and now the people from that condo association come through the fence and park in my neighborhood because there's not enough parking in their neighborhood, so that's a concern for me. Another concern that I wasn't able to see on these was how the traffic flow is going to change. Right now, Rio School Lane is the access to my property, and there's no stop sign at the end of Rio School Lane. Is
Sir,
there
make
gonna
sure,
be-
I'm sorry, sir, make sure you address the council.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm just wondering if there's going to be a traffic, and also I was wondering if it would be possible for me to get copies of the site plan that were shown in this, or copies of this presentation. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll make sure that after all the speakers have spoken, that all the questions that have been asked will be addressed. Okay? Yes, sir. Very next speaker is Tony Telemonte, to be followed by Joel Kirschenstein, please.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, again, my name is Tony Telemonte, and I represent the Pacific Companies with respect to this project. We're very pleased to be at City Council this evening, and we'll take this opportunity. What we'd like to do as well is to supplement the city staff presentation, which is an excellent presentation, and supplement that with some additional information. I would also like to request if Joel Kirstenstein could speak first with respect to Rio School District partnership in this development.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. Joel Kirschenstein. I'm here on behalf of the Rio School District, District Superintendent, Dr. Puglisi, and all of the board members. We have been going along and moving along with this particular project as a co-applicant for almost 4 years now. And on the outset, I can say that of all the developer, public-private sector partnerships that I've been involved in, I have never found a developer more supportive of a school district or a public agency. They have been absolutely supportive to the point where they trusted this process enough to advance millions of dollars off of the sale price to the school district for their facilities. Specifically, this project is in the students that are being generated from this project are in this district's master plan for state funding. So we certainly want this approved as soon as possible, not to lose the next cycle, which is at least a few $1 million for the students that come out of this project. We don't want to lose that cycle. So the sooner this moves forward, the better. In addition, something that rarely takes place, the school board adjusted the price after this development project went through the surplus property process, the bid process, and the open bidding, and then the RFP process, and went into escrow. The water allocation process came behind all of this. This has been going on for 4 years. And the board, with the recommendation of the superintendent, accepted a price adjustment based on the reduction of units to be in compliance with the water allocation policy. So the original units were considered to be too high from city staff to be in compliance with the water allocation policy. And the board made that adjustment in price to allow this to go forward. So that's something, again, that it's almost unheard of. Something in escrow that occurred before facto rather than ex post facto. So and then the project is in the staff report. It's definitely needed for employee housing. I know city staff, school district administration has a very difficult time once they hire, especially younger people, to find residences in any of the areas in Ventura County. So this is that kind of a project. And finally, a final point, the transportation, the buses that are all parked and have been parked along there for a long time will all be relocated to a new location. That's pretty significant for the traffic along that street, and then the visual interpretation. In summary, they have been quite a model partnership to work with, and the superintendent and board very definitely supports this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just note, this is a public hearing, and we do have one additional speaker, but it is a public hearing. If anyone here would like to speak, please fill out a speaker card. Pat Brown, please. Or did you want to just follow up with that then? Ms. Brown, hold on. Mr. Telemonte, did you want to finish then right afterwards? Okay. Yes.
I can finish now.
Okay, why don't you finish now? That's Ms. Brown just sat back down.
Thank you very much.
So I just want to make sure, Madam City Clerk, the time's adjusted. I wasn't noting the time when he started and then introduced Mr. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Yes. Well, why don't we proceed and we'll give it as much time as he needs.
This should take no longer than about 10 minutes. We just wanted
Okay.
to expand on a couple of things from the city staff
Okay, thank you.
report. Thank you. Just briefly as well, just to supplement the city staff report. Again, the project is 167 residential units, including 20 designated affordable units, a 15,000 square foot administrative office building. The next bullet, the 27% of site landscape for pedestrian open space and community rec pavilion. That's very important for the project with respect to how the project was planned. When it was initially introduced, there was a higher request of units, but as we worked with staff, as we looked at really what works best for this, what we're going to call it an enclave community. It's an urban infill project. What works best for the residents who will be purchasing in this community? Again, accenting where the project sits, its walkability to local retail, schools, local parks, shopping, and restaurants. It's a walking distance to the River Park schools, a walking distance to River Park parks, and walking distance, of course, to the collection as well. This project definitely supports the City of Oxnard housing needs. Also, as Joel pointed out earlier, very critical to the Real School District facility funding. I'd like to introduce Lori Summers with KTGY. She's the project architect, also director of design for director of design for KTGY here in Southern California. And then ask her just to talk about the site plan, the buildings, the architecture that's designed for this project. Lori?
Thank you, Tony. Good evening. Just wanted to share with you really the focus of this project and how so much of it, even from the beginning and even as we've manipulated through, was really about this idea of activated open spaces and front doors on open spaces and a community where people were really flowing through and making really a neighborly place. So we have what you'll see, three primary spaces where we really are getting a lot of activity and various programming from barbecues, from tot lot spaces, and other play features, the fire pits and water features, et cetera. So all of that's really coming into three really significant outdoor spaces that are also accented by smaller outdoor spaces in other smaller pockets closer to various buildings, so that really everybody has an opportunity to make their way to a larger space or use one of the smaller spaces. And we have units that have access off of these spaces, so really we're expecting that we get a lot of activity going on here. And this all benefits from this scenario of really having these drive courts, and the fact that we're trying to keep vehicles out of the space as much as possible and really create a fully pleasant neighborhood. So as a part of that, you're seeing windows onto that spaces, front doors onto all those spaces, with an architecture that has high quality detailing in a clean missionary style. This is the residential buildings, one of the residential buildings. There's several color palettes as well, similar throughout, that bring differentiation but continuity to the project. And then the office building, again, over closer to the other commercial spaces, out activating along the frontage is a contemporary version of that, a more contemporary version of architecture, but very compatible with the space, and allows for certainly a new home and better home for the district.
Laurie, thank you. On the tentative track map, I just want to focus on a couple of things that actually have been mentioned earlier as well. On the track map and part of the staff report, we do as part of the Vineyard Avenue scenic corridor, we have a significant setback off of Vineyard Avenue. That's 30 feet. We have a enhanced broadened sidewalk along the edge as well. That's a 7-foot sidewalk to enhance the pedestrian circulation around the project area there. Then on the landscape plan, just highlighting a couple of items that Lori mentioned. All of these are play areas. This is a play area with play structure. This area is the recreation building where we have 2 floors of design fitness center. And then across the parkway, we have a tot lot in this area and a large play area here as well. And then the significant that came up during the discussion on Planning Commission was how do we get better access into the Vallarta market? We've had discussion with Vallarta markets, and they are in agreement to allow a property access at this location. And then the details of that will be worked out with more input from Vallarta markets. But it is in place as well. This is just a detail of the resident access gate that we're looking at today on our plans. To summarize, again, 167 units with the affordable component. One thing that we're very proud of on this project that is very consistent and actually exceeds, in some cases, all of the new water conservation and energy conservation requirements. This project will have solar panels on it as well, and we're working out the details how that will function with the residents and the HOA needs. Again, it's, as Lori pointed out, it's designed to be aesthetic and a quality market rate affordable project. When I say market rate affordable project, that's inclusive of our inclusionary 20 affordable units to make it comfortable, to have it available to teachers, to a price point within this area that I think is going to provide very good accessibility to home ownership. Again, the project is compliant with building code criteria within the city of Oxnard. And then I want to reiterate again, supporting the city of Oxnard housing needs. That's really important for us as well. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to your favorable consideration on this project. I have my project team in the audience, so if there's any questions, we would be more than glad to answer them. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we'll have the last speaker, Pat Brown, please. And quick reminder, this is a public hearing. If anyone would like to speak, fill out a speaker card, hand it to the city clerk. You'll be calling the order which your card is submitted. Ms. Brown.
Most of my adult life, I have lived in multifamily housing projects of different kinds. So because of the fact that I'm 78 years old, almost 79, That's a lot of time living in multifamily housing, of many different kinds, by the way. In fact, we used to, when we were really young, we would move every year to a brand-new building where we would have everything brand new, and once they, after a year or so, and they'd start letting the pool go, and they'd start letting this and that and the greenery go and everything, we just move out to another new one. We just kept moving and moving. When you're young and you don't have a lot of heavy furniture, it's real easy. I am looking at this 167 residential units. For 167 residential units, that would be at least 2 parking spaces per, so that's 334 parking spaces. Plus, for that many units, you would need at least minimum of 40 guest parking spaces that the people who live there cannot park in, that are only allowed for the guests. That's a minimum. I live in the Royal Palms Mobile Home Park in the downtown area. We have 153 spaces, I think it is. We have about 30-some guest parking spaces, which isn't nearly enough. And there's, on average, each mobile home has two parking spaces. Mine, I've got 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and only 1 parking space, but I have 2 guest parking spaces out in front of my unit, except that they're always full. And there's never enough, and we have people parking in the street all the time, and they're not allowed to do it, but they still do it anyway because there's no place to park. I've been there since 1993. In 1993, it was okay because it was only a senior park. But I wasn't old enough, but my husband was, so we got to be in there from then. As long as we had no children in there, it was okay. But once, and it was all seniors, over 55. Once we got the children in there, the cars just started mounting up. And so now we've got everything and way more cars than we can find parking spaces for. So I'm just recommending, if you're thinking ahead, you better think extra parking.
Thank you so much. And that appears to have concluded the public testimony portion of this public hearing, and ask for a motion to close that public testimony portion of the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right, the public testimony portion of this public hearing is now closed, and now it's time for the City Council to deliberate. And I'm not seeing Madame City Clerk. Oh, no, I'm seeing it. Mayor Pro Tem, I just want to ask the members of the council to make sure they indicate on the parliamentarian that if they desire to speak, to do so there.
Oh, that's what this is called. I thought you were the parliamentarian.
Well,
it's the little machine.
It looks like we have 2, an automatic and a human one, anyway.
Okay, thank you. Just very quickly, I do think this looks very beautiful, and I didn't quite catch the name of our architect. Could somebody just say the name of our architect? Thank you very much.
Lori Summers.
Thank you. It looks very beautiful, but I do have just a couple of questions for clarification. Maybe you could answer. And the gate to Vallarta, that's a gate, right? It would be
Yes.
open and closed by operation of a remote or something like that?
Yes, we're planning to have a fob scenario at this point,
Okay.
and we need to work through that.
Okay.
We've also been in coordination with the police department. For instance, they specifically wanted to make sure that we had clear ability to see through the gate for a certain amount on either side, so that there'd be some
Right.
visibility as there
Great.
well. So we've been coordinating in that way as well.
And is there public transportation available close by? Do you know? Somebody know? Probably.
there is,
Probably bus stop, something like that.
There
Dr.
is,
Williamson?
Hi, Mayor Flynn.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, and good evening. Yes, Gold Coast Transit has a stop almost directly in front of this project. It's kind of shared with the Vallarta
Okay, great.
Market.
Um,
Northbound stop.
I would imagine that some of the people who may buy this property are teachers, as was said. for the district, employees from the district, and potentially it could be walking to the main office or the schools that are in the vicinity, maybe, who knows. That's just a comment. And when might this go to LAFCO? Thank you very much.
If council takes the action tonight, one of those actions is to authorize us to submit an annexation application to LAFCO. As Scott said, LAFCO's made it clear if we don't have an active executed tax sharing agreement, it will be an incomplete application. So our hope is that we can work with the county to get an executed tax sharing agreement similar to the one, as we referenced in the staff report, that was adopted in 1983. That will make it a complete application for LAFCO to process.
Okay. And I know that the Rio School District has been very patient and done a lot of accommodation to get this done, so I do really support it. When might demolition of the current buildings start, the existing buildings? You have an idea? If we get approved and everything goes through LAFCO?
Yeah, that's actually, that's a very good question, and it's really contingent on how quickly we can move forward into the annexation action, and then how quickly we can go into a project-specific tax share agreement.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I do support this project. I think it's beautiful and needed and very helpful to the school district and ultimately to the children, so I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Perillo.
Thank you very much. Number one, I appreciate the fact that you guys have you're working out something with a gate so that people can go to the market next door versus having to cross 4 lanes of very active traffic. That's a big deal. A couple of questions. The power lines will be underground. There will be no overhead power lines in this project?
Mr. Mayor and Councilman Perillo, along Vineyard, there's, I think, 3 or 4 tall poles for 66K lines. Those are transmission lines. They need to be moved back about 6 or 7 feet. So they will remain as overhead lines. They're just too big to put underground. But all the utilities on the site will be underground.
Okay. The reason I asked that question is the junior high school, when that project was approved for River Park, was supposed to have the power lines on Vineyard Avenue, my understanding, underground, but there was some sort of a switcheroo and they never went underground. There's no possibility these lines in front of the site can go underground?
Basically, no.
Okay. Thank you. The next question is, it appears they're 3-story buildings, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just a scenario. We have a person that wants to get in one, and they potentially have a handicapped person with a wheelchair. Is there elevators planned in certain units?
All of our first floor units are required to be accessible and be designed to be accessible. So they will have, they will have access, and all of their interiors will be designed as necessary with required clearances and other features so that they would be available.
So the answer is no, there is no elevators being planned?
Oh, sorry, there are no elevators for the buildings, but there are accessible units.
Okay, thank you. A very strong compliment for it's going to be solar. That's a big deal to me. You're thinking ahead. Compliments. The comment about walkability to the parks and River Park. Yes, you can walk, but ladies and gentlemen, Vineyard Avenue is a very, very, I'll put money on it. It's one of the most busy intersections. At that time in the morning and the afternoon, between the trucks, the cars, the number of people and everything, I used to live on Vineyard Avenue. I didn't like having to cross Vineyard Avenue. It was like, it was not fun. So the walkability, I don't know how many people are going to walk across to go to the parks, and I'll support this, but sort of the implication that, it's going to be very easy to accommodate and get across, not really. But I'll support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I don't seem to have other council members that have used or utilized the parliamentarian. I would just like to say in conclusion that When this project first came to the City Council, as was noted in the presentation, we had a lot of concerns for a variety of reasons. This originally, as was presented, was a school site, and now is being converted into housing, which Mayor Pro Tem said, and other council members have spoken about it, that the housing is very, very much needed. Vineyard Avenue is still a real challenge when it comes to traffic because it's a state highway. Most people don't know it's a state highway. But I feel that the changes that the applicant has made are consistent with what it is that the City Council expressed a concern about. So had other projects that recently come to us, and I won't mention those by name because they're not part of the public hearing, it's all vetted, and we would have probably had a project in many of these other areas. So this is the way things are supposed to take place. So I want to compliment the applicant and or applicants, those who have worked with the applicant, and also city staff for working very closely for this project. So it's a win-win situation. Yes, Councilman Perillo.
Apologize, Mayor, there's one right in front of me, I missed it. The community workshop that was held for this, how many people from the community attended that?
Mr. Mayor and Councilman Perillo, I recall, well, there were several other items on the agenda that night, so there might have been 12 or so, and I think about 6 commented on the project.
Okay, thank you, because tonight, before the council meeting, we got a letter that the city received on the 31st of the month, and the individual is asking a lot of questions about how it's going to impact the neighborhood across Vineyard Avenue. And there's a complaint that certain areas weren't notified, but I believe we probably notified within the legal parameter. But his main complaint, and I believe the gentleman is still here with the baseball cap, asked about U-turns. I mean, again, having a lot of experience on Vineyard Avenue, do we feel that we've addressed the concerns of the individuals that are going to, I see the planning nodding their head. Can please somebody just address it?
Yeah, I would just say the Planning Commission was also concerned about some of those same issues. That's part of why they didn't act when it was first before them, and we continued it a month. And then when we brought it back and provided that additional analysis on traffic-related issues, the Commission was satisfied and recommended approval.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Second.
Madam City Clerk, we have a motion by Councilman McDonald and a second by Mayor Pro Tem. The vote, please.
Oh, hold on. Sorry, I had to say. Sorry, can you guys start over? The motion carries 7-0.
Very well. So that ends the public hearings for this evening, or single public hearing. And now we'll move to reports. We're still on page 5 of the agenda. And this report, number 1, is under the Finance Department, the Corrective Action Plan. Recommendation that the City Council receives an update on progress made at the Corrective Action Plan in response to single audit findings received for audits conducted on fiscal years 2015 through 2018. This did go to the Finance and Governance Committee. It was approved 3-0. Yes, Mr. Riper, CFO.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. As the mayor just mentioned, the Finance and Governance Committee saw this presentation last month. It was given by Assistant CFO Donna Ventura. But she's on vacation this week, so it's going to take 2 of us to replace her. I'll do the first half, and Senior Manager Internal Controls Christine Williams will make the second half of the presentation. A little background before we get into the numbers and the scorecard. The city's independent financial auditors, Edie and Payne, from whom we'll hear on the next item, and who are also here to answer questions, conducted audits in 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. Single audits. Those are federally required audits to look at our internal controls. And as is well known, they uncovered a lot of findings, a lot of audit findings in those 4 audits. 111 audit findings just in the first year, just in the 2015 audit, and then 61 more in the 3 years since. So we have a total of 172 audit findings over the last 4 years. Mostly policies and procedures, or that they didn't exist. and internal control effectiveness. So, in 2016 and 2017 and early 2018, the Finance Department, my predecessors, developed a corrective action plan. That was finished in March of 2018 and then submitted to the State Controller's Office for review and approval. And ever since March of 2018, the Finance Department has been focusing, along with other operating departments, on addressing, doing, executing the corrective action plan. So we're going to give you a progress report as we did to Finance and Governance earlier. The 2019 single audit won't finish by Edie and Payne until the end of March. So the last bullet talks about what's coming. We will come back to the Finance and Governance Committee in the spring and then to the full council after that. So this is just the first 4 years. We have one more year, one more audit to incorporate into this corrective action plan. Now, a couple of boring definitions before we get to the scorecard. In categorizing the status of the different audit findings, we have these categories. We have a complete, which means the auditors have given it their blessing and it's done. We have a category for audit findings in the status of to be tested, which means that we, the staff, have created policies and procedures and instituted a recommended course of action and have done staff training for the various staff in the city who will execute those policies and procedures. And we think they're ready to go, but they're in the auditor's in-basket, and the auditors need to test them. So to be tested means to be tested by Edie and Payne. The third category of status for our audit findings is policies and procedures draft, which means staff, usually finance staff, has created policies and procedures. They're only in draft form. They haven't reached my desk yet, so they're not ready to go to the auditors for testing. In progress means we've just started, and then not started is self-explanatory. And there's 7 of those 172 audit findings that you'll see in a moment on the scorecard on the status table that the auditors have determined no longer require corrective action, so they kind of fall off. So to the scorecard, to the status table. This is a complicated table, so I want to walk you through how it works. So we're going to start by looking at the final column, the total number of findings. I mentioned in my introductory remarks 172 audit findings total over the 4 years, but 22 of those are repeat findings. They weren't solved in year 1, so they reappeared in year 2 and so forth. So in our scoring, and Edie and Payne's agreed with this, we have 150 unique findings. Total unique findings is 150. So that's our ultimate target. So here's how the table works. Of those 150 unique findings, so far, 86 of them are complete. The auditors have signed off, said you're good to go. I mentioned a moment ago that there are some where the auditors said there's no longer required action. Well, there's 7 of those, so 7 that no longer need action and 86 that are done is a total of 93. So if you subtract the 93 that are taken care of from the 150 that we have findings for, that leaves 57. The last row is the total of unresolved unique findings, 57 in grand total. Now let's go to the left. Here are the 4 categories: material weakness, significant deficiency, non-compliance, and best practice. Worst to least impactful. A material weakness is what we want to focus on, and there are still 23 unresolved findings that are material weaknesses and 22 on significant deficiencies. Much smaller number for non-compliance and best practice. But you add them all up and you get 57 total unresolved findings. So that's the status through this 4th audit, through this 4th year of audits by Edie and Payne. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Williams, who is the Senior Manager for Internal Controls. She just transitioned from her previous job for 4 years as our controller, so she knows the ins and outs of the city's books, its history. She's lived through the agony of these audits, and now she's responsible, along with me and the rest of the staff, for addressing the corrective action plan and the internal control integrated framework. And she's going to talk to you about progress in the last couple of years, and then what she and her role will be concentrating on in the next year and going forward. Christine?
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members.
Pull the mic down a little bit.
Thank you. So this slide represents our progress that we've made to date. It represents by category and for the last 2 fiscal years the progress that we've made to date. I'm going to go ahead and focus on just our 2 main ones, which are material weaknesses and significant deficiencies. So for fiscal year 17-18, you can see we weren't able to make any progress. However, for fiscal year 18-19, we were able to resolve 12 material weaknesses. And for significant deficiencies, we had 33 in fiscal year 17. However, they grew slightly in 18. However, in fiscal year 18 to 19, we were able to resolve 17 significant deficiencies. You might ask, where did we make those improvements in? Out of the 30 fully resolved significant deficiencies and material weaknesses, I want to give credit where credit is due. The IT department, they were able to accomplish and resolve 11 significant deficiencies for the department. So that was quite a few out of those 17 significant deficiencies we made progress in. The finance department, we were able to establish and implement policies and/or procedures in the following areas: cash receipts, journal entries, capital assets, construction in progress, interest income policy, and year-end accruals. We also, in the purchasing department, we were able to make significant improvements in the purchasing practices that I believe you heard about previously. And we are also able to make improvements between HR and payroll to segregate those duties. So for fiscal year 2020, you should be expecting significant progress to be made. Oops, let me go back here. We have the long-awaited new ERP system, which is Tyler Munis. That'll be implemented in fiscal year 2020. This will help us automate our controls. We also have continued to focus our staff on internal controls and implementing the correction action plan. This will be my main focus in my new role. We have additional training to be provided for the staff for on-the-job training. We've been sending our staff to 2 main government finance organizations that train on accounting and internal controls, and those are the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers and the Government Finance Officers Association. And then lastly, we have stability and continuity in leadership, key leadership positions. Our Assistant CFO, Donna Ventura, and our Chief Financial Officer, Kevin Riper, have been here with the city for a year now. And this concludes our presentation, and Kevin and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and I do not have right now any speaker cards, Madam City Clerk. Okay, very well. So I first and foremost want to say that this did come before the Finance and Governance Committee. I stated that when I read the item, and I will just withhold my remarks until all other people have spoken. So why don't we go ahead and call on Mayor Pro Tem, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the work. I always like to ask, well, I'll ask our auditors later because they're going to be presenting. Thank you. I do think, and we heard it earlier in public comment, some understanding or concept that some of these problems that have been revealed could have been immediately cleaned up 4 years ago, and there's frustration in the community that has taken quite a long time. And I'd just like, I'd like one of you to comment on the length of how long did some of these issues last, or where did they come from? How long have they been existent? Because we on council, the majority of us, we're relying on our staff, and when staff we've had tremendous turnover. So what a feat, Mr. Riper, to be here a whole year. Please do not go away. It's been quite a challenge too, because since I've been here, I think we've gone through 3 or 4
of every department head, and finance is a particular challenge. So could you, one of you comment on that?
How long did some of these deficiencies exist?
It's probably a question best left to the auditors, so I'm going to bring them up next. My sense is for the little paperwork that we did find, which was so old, and then for the paperwork, the policies and procedures, the steps that you're supposed to take being written down that don't exist, my sense is it's been going on for a very long time. But Edie and Payne did the audits. So let me ask either
ask
Don
them.
Ecker
Oh.
or Eden Casarino to answer that question, because they did the audits. Don or Eden?
If now's the appropriate time, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
A lot has happened in the last 5 years, and actually, a corrective action plan is much like going on a diet. It's easy to adopt. It's very difficult to actually accomplish it. And you saw all the steps up there. With the turnover, many of the steps just never took place. And so as a result, it just started
We had to keep
to
reinventing.
reinventing.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But if you look back 5 years, I don't know, 2-3 months ago, Alex says, could you give me a little reflection? And at the end of the day, 5 years ago, you had 4 sets of consultants plus your auditors. We made hundreds of millions of dollars in adjustments. Your reports were late. You had a qualified opinion. It was ugly. It's great to be here this evening and talk about stability and progress.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the hard work.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Basua.
Thank you. I just want to, reiterate the comments that I made at the committee level. 172 findings are a lot of findings, but what I'm looking for is progress. And like I said, having 57 remaining things it's still a task. It's a huge task, but I'm happy to see the progress, and I appreciate all the hard work. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And it doesn't look like any other speakers are looking to speak. Councilman Perillo.
As a member of the committee, I want to thank you very much to staff. They've come a long way in a relatively short period of time, considering where we were. And all hands on deck. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just to kind of summarize what also happened on the committee level, the bottom line is that looking at a 5-year time period from 2015 to 2019, the fact is that two-thirds of all these findings have been dealt with. So if that's not progress, I don't know what is. And that certainly is not consistent with a previous speaker's comments about the assessment of either individual members of the council or the council as a whole and the disastrous policies that have either preceded them or followed them. The fact is that when you have this many deficiencies, and it was just reviewed by the auditor, I mean, it's talked about by the auditor, it's unimaginable that any one public entity or any entity, but a public entity could have this many findings. I mean, it's, and I don't know. In fact, Mr. Riper, that would be my question, just to properly contextualize this. How many public entities have you worked for that had this many findings, or have all the entities you work for combined not had this many?
So if you put together my career and Donna Ventura, Assistant CFO Donna Ventura's career, so we span 60 years, 60, and 10 different organizations, 7 cities and 3 Fortune 500 companies, mine being the cities and Ms. Ventura being the Fortune 500 companies. In those 60 years, we've never had one material weakness, not one between us. And here we're dealing with dozens.
And just to summarize, the bottom line of a vast majority of these findings had a lot to do with internal controls. Could you explain that and to properly contextualize this?
Yes, internal controls relates to segregation of duties, anti-fraud, not allowing conditions to exist where malfeasance or misfeasance can take place, and good cross-checking of work that's done so that auditors can come in and audit accurately, and finally, providing supporting documentation for transactions that do occur. So our internal control integrated framework on which Ms. Williams will work is going to try to take us to the next level in documenting those internal controls that make sure that the transactions and the finances of a city, any organization, are run with integrity, accuracy, and without loss or embezzlement or theft.
And last question, thank you for that explanation. The P&P policies and procedures, and you talked about, again, you had them ranked and where they are and things like that. How many different staff members are responsible for designing those policies and procedures, and ultimately it comes down to you approving them, is that correct?
Yes, we probably have half a dozen in the finance department, and I can't speak to the IT department. Theirs is a whole separate thing that we don't even know about. But there's probably several in the IT department who are working on their internal controls and general findings as well. So it's quite a few people. And then there's operating implications out in the operating department, so we need to run these past them as well. But the main responsibility is probably with half a dozen people in finance.
Very well. Thank you very much. Yes, Councilman Perillo.
Again, thank you very much for being on board, Mr. Riper and Ms. Ventura. But some compliment has to go to the city manager for bringing you guys on board. We're very lucky to have the team we got in place right now, contrary to some comments that were made at public comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this agenda item was to just receive an update on the corrective action plan. So we want to thank very much the staff, finance staff, for an excellent job. Well done. Thank you very much. Item 2 under the Finance Department, and we're on page 6 of the agenda. The subject, fiscal year 2018-2019, comprehensive annual financial report and summary presentation. Recommendations that the City Council receive and file a fiscal year 2018-2019 comprehensive annual financial report, otherwise known as the CAFR, and receive a summary presentation presented by the city's external auditors, Edie & Payne, and this did go to the Finance and Governance Committee. It was approved 3-0. Mr. Riper, please.
Thank you again. The comprehensive annual financial report was published to the city's website some weeks ago. I've got half a dozen copies here for members of the audience who are dying for some evening reading to extend over quite a number of months. The audit was conducted by Edie & Payne, and they assisted substantially in preparing the comprehensive annual financial report. So again, Eden Casarino and Don Ecker of Edie & Payne are going to give the presentation tonight.
Thank you, Kevin, and good evening again. It's certainly nice to be here this evening. Eden is going to do the vast majority of the report because she and her team spend a lot of time here. But I wanted to give an overall view of how complex accounting is, just like everything else in the world today. A clean opinion used to be about 3/4 of a page. Your clean opinion is 4 pages long. So in any event, that's the highest level of assurance that you can get. The critical areas that I would emphasize is that did we encounter any challenges during the audit? And I'm happy to report that there were none. We obviously debated things, and in the end, you should be extremely pleased with your management team that we had no audit adjustments this year. So our hat's off to you. No material adjustments. The corrective action plan continues to consume a tremendous amount of time by your staff and ourselves because we have to spend additional time to address and mitigate the risk on an ongoing basis. And I would expect, as those material weaknesses and significant deficiencies continue to be addressed, that your time and expenses will go down in the future. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eden.
Good evening, Mayor Flynn, members of the City Council, ladies and gentlemen. So I wanted to go over, well, first of all, I wanted to thank first, our finance department and a lot of other people in the other departments as well. IT, for example, HR, our public works, our city management up on the fourth floor, Treasury Department. They all helped in providing us the information that we need to be able to complete our audit. And hats off to all of them for being patient with us. So I wanted to take a look a little bit about our CAFR highlights. These two graphs or two pie charts represent 2018 and 2019 balance sheet of the entire government. Meaning that includes all of your governmental activities and all your business type activities, including water, wastewater, and even Oxnard Housing Authority. So as you can see here, they're very similar last year and this year. I wanted to point out net position is the same, pretty much, $2.2 billion. Your net position is the difference between your assets and liabilities. That means that's what remains after you take all of your assets and pay off all the liabilities. Net position consists of your net investment in capital assets, meaning all your capital assets, the value of all the facilities, infrastructure that you have, less any liabilities that you had incurred when you put all of these capital assets together. That is consists of $2.2 billion. You also have restricted net position, which is $148 million. They are not here. I'm sorry I didn't put that in there. But what I wanted to point out is you still have unrestricted net position, but there it's in a deficit, meaning it's $160 million in deficit, and that's because you have the pension and OPEB liability. That's really what's bringing the unrestricted net position down. However, I wanted to point out that that unrestricted amount went up by $53 million since last year. So that's a positive movement, and we want to see the positive movement every single year so that you keep reducing that deficit. This one is looking at revenues and expenses of governmental activities only, and the next slide I'll show you the business type activities. So total revenues during 2019 increased from the prior year by $29 million. Total expenses decreased by $13 million. However, the change in net position, meaning the excess of revenues versus expenses, was actually a deficit. It's a lower deficit than last year. The deficit this year is $9 million, whereas in last year was $44 million. This shows the business type activities. All business type activities were in a positive this year, meaning the red line is longer than the green line. That means it's positive net at the bottom. Change in net position is positive. In total, that positive number increased by $25 million this year from last year. So you're doing something good there. Continue to do that. This one is general fund group. As you can see, in 2018, The green is expenditures and revenues is blue. So you can see the green bar in 2018 is a little higher than the blue bar. So that means that you are in a deficit then. This year, the blue bar is a little higher than the green bar. So that means that you have, I guess, $1 million in a positive there. So as you can see, government-wide versus just the general fund, there's positive takeaways right away. However, if you're looking at over the 5 years, expenses outpaced revenues over the 5 years, and you can see that here. That's the green line is expense. So in 2018, it went over the blue line, and then it didn't go down as much as the revenue went up. So it's still a little. There's still a little gap there. Not to make this appear simplistic, but you need to pay attention to the spending. Leave within your means. That's always a good thing. But also consider other sources of funds. Your property taxes and sales taxes are your biggest sources, but there's also grants. There's also charges for services that you provide. Also, interest on investments. Those are good things to consider when you are looking for other sources of funds, because you can only limit your spending by so much. Otherwise, you should be cutting down on your services. So always looking for that other sources of funds, and that's the only other way, too, that you can save for the rainy day, having your reserves. So let me go here now for the general fund group. Oh, it didn't line up, sorry. The unrestricted fund balance there should actually include committed fund balance, assigned fund balance, and unassigned fund balance. The bracket didn't line up to where it should be. When we're talking about unrestricted fund balance, that's the amounts that you are free to, use for all the services that you need. That's the green bar at the, I can't show, sorry. Okay, I can't see. Is this where it is? Is that where it is? No, it's not working, sorry. Okay, well, I can just say the green bar is your restricted, there you go, this one. So the green bar here, 2019, is your unrestricted fund balance. That represents about $32 million of your fund balance in the general fund. That actually covers 20% of your total expenditures in the general fund, which is $158 million. Overall, in the governmental funds, your unrestricted fund balance is $46 million. That constitutes 22% of your expenditures for a year. So when we made a presentation here at the Finance and Governance Committee, we had talked about unassigned fund balance, but Kevin pointed out to us, you also need to look at the committed and the assigned, because those are available to you as well. And that is so true. So you're looking at the unrestricted fund balance rather than the restricted or the non-spendable, because those are not as available to you as the other areas. By the way, the unrestricted fund balance include the Measure O funds. So the GFOA, or the Government Finance Officers Association, recommends that governments should establish a policy on the level of unrestricted fund balance. I believe you do that when you do your budget appropriations. But I wanted to say that you also have a reserve policy, which may not be the same as your unrestricted fund balance. Your reserve policy are really set aside of funds. Those are not readily available to you to spend on things. There are reserves that are provided to give you more options for unexpected issues. So let me go to the critical audit matters. These are matters that we are required to communicate to you by our auditing standards. So Don had already mentioned that you encountered no challenges and we had no material adjustments, which is, to me, is the biggest thing when we're doing audits and we don't have any material adjustments. We're just like, yay. We had implemented new accounting pronouncements, or actually the city had implemented new accounting pronouncements. I can, allow you to read that. For accounting estimates, they are still very similar to last year. Your pension liability, your OPEB liability, and self-insurance claims, those are based on actuarial estimates that are provided by management based on actuarial estimates provided by your consultants. There's significant disclosures that you should try to read, even though it's very, very long. There's cash and investment disclosures in the CAFR, bonds payable, pension and OPEB liabilities, and also risk and uncertainties, and there are different areas of the CAFR. Finally, we will issue an internal control report along with a compliance report and single audit report on the city's corrective action plan in March 2020. So even though you had heard the corrective action plan status today, there will be updates to that in March, which hopefully we will have more items that are completed. So with that, thank you very much, and if you have any questions, we'll be here.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the presentation. Excuse me. And what I'd like to do now is just look, Madam City Clerk, we don't seem to have any speakers on the CAFR on this item. Okay, so what I'd like to do, again, this went to the Finance and Governance Committee and was passed 3-0. And what I'd like to do is start with Mayor Pro Tem, please.
I just want to thank Mr. Ecker and Ms. Casarano for continuing to do the hard work of helping us understand our budget and where we can improve. And we've come a long way. I know there were some very difficult days at the beginning, and practically all of the staff has turned over because not that they were doing anything wrong, but just the work was so difficult, and it's so much easier for people to, when they need to for family reasons, go elsewhere to make a little bit more money under less difficult circumstances. So I really appreciate the staff's work, and thank you for coming out again. And again, thank our finance staff for not leaving us. Please don't go away. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councilman Madrigal, please.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for the hard work and dedication on this. And to the auditors, thank you for always being straight shooters, being honest, good or bad, every time you come up here. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any additional council members like to make comments? Councilman Perillo.
Yes. Thank you very much for the report. As a member of the Finance and Governance Committee, the young lady that was with you at that meeting, she made a couple of comments, and I'm going to ask with respect to that. If we can go up to slide 6, please. And I have had the opportunity to speak to Mr. Riper on this here. The amount of money that the city uses per month on an average, if we were to take 12 months and how much we spend per month, the reserves that we had, there was a comment with respect to how far the reserves would go. Do you recall that? Can you please share that with the rest of the council?
So we had mentioned at the Finance and Governance Committee meeting that the GFOA had recommended, and they've always recommended, at least 2 months of your budget to be in your reserves. Now, that really is a recommendation that's very general. The amount of reserve that you should have as an entity depends on the risks that you are looking at, the risks that you would assess in your government. So that one is just, big or small, wherever you are, whatever situation you're in, it's recommended that you have 2 months. But, you have to look at the different things that affect you, the different factors that you, that impact the city in order to be able to really say how much it would be.
So if I can just, the recommendation would be 2 months, 8 weeks. And there was a statement, I believe we had how many weeks in reserves? And when I'm asking that, before you answer, I did speak with the chief CFO, and he explained that we're in a different position now because we have funds that if we needed to, we could borrow from enterprise funds. So we're in a totally different, but I want to make sure the rest of my council members know what the heads up that had been given at the Finance Committee. I think it's very important, and I definitely hope that you will repeat what the young lady said.
Yes, I agree. So we had said that you had an assigned fund balance of $9 million, and that equates to like 3 weeks of your budget.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now, I would say, though, that we had looked at the unassigned fund balance, but I was just saying earlier that you should actually include all of your unrestricted fund balance, which represents about 20% of your budget.
Okay, and again, thank you for all the work you guys have done over the years and the city staff. You're very, I forget the slide number, but the very first one, you talked about something about when you talked to the city and you asked questions, there was nobody dodging, or you were able to get whatever information you needed. That's, from a councilman's point of view, I really feel good about that. Nobody's hiding the bananas. Nobody's hiding nothing. So thank you very much for your work. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Are there any additional comments by any members of the council? So I just would like to thank not only the auditor, but the finance department. I had asked the city manager and his staff when this would come, when the presentation would be made before the committee, to do exactly what was done, and that is give the council really what the bottom line is, a summary of the bottom line. And I think the most important thing to be said about this is it was a clean opinion. And a clean opinion indicates that the city's books are in order and its financial books are in order. And one of the conclusions that had been made over the last decade and a half, or maybe 2 decades, is that not only did the city keep very poor financial records, it just kept poor records, period. But arguably, financial records are the most important. So a clean opinion indicates that the city's financial records are in order. So that's kind of a quick summary of, the clean opinion. Also, that the CAFR, the Certified Annual Financial Report, just to contextualize this, it's an independent auditor looking at the city's finances. So the city can't use smoke and mirrors like some kind of end-of-the-year report. Sometimes it's used to kind of paint a rosy picture of the city. A clean opinion also indicates in the estimation of the auditor that the city is presenting the financial information fairly. So that's important to talk about. And finally, that the city's fiscal operations, so its end-of-the-year account, which we just heard about here, that is the budget, and each year we have a budget, and its fiscal year starts in July 1st for the state of California and for cities, and that the fiscal operations of the city are consistent with the generally accepted accounting principles. Those are principles that are established outside of all cities that set as best practices and guidelines for how cities organize their finances. So that's the very positive thing to be said. It's basically a clean opinion on the city's finances. The challenges obviously remain for the city, And it was noted then by the auditor that this $160 million deficit primarily comes from pension liabilities and post-employment benefit liabilities, and that's something that over time is going to be very challenging for the city and all cities in the state of California to deal with that, because in essence, more and more is coming out of the general fund to cover these liabilities, and we're just hoping that the, and this sounds like I'm joking about it, but I'm dead serious. We just hope there's not a recession anytime soon, number one, and we hope that the stock market continues to deliver the returns that it's delivering today, because if the stock market turns in the other direction, then these liabilities for not just Oxnard, but all cities, they grow. So that's my perspective as the chairman of the Finance and Governance Committee, and I'm really happy, Mr. City Manager, with the progress that your staff is making, and I want to say congratulations to the City Council for making decisions that are consistent with our goals and objectives. Thank you. So this is to only receive and file, and so the City Council does not need to take a vote on this item. And now we'll move to the final item this evening, which is item 3 of the City Manager's Department. And the subject, City of Oxnard Internal Audit Annual Work Plan Proposal, Fiscal Year 2019-2020. The recommendation is that the City Council ratify the Internal Auditor Annual Work Plan for fiscal year 2019-2020. And this also came to the Finance and Governance Committee, and it was approved 3-0. Yes, sir.
Mayor, I'll be making the presentation.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
And we do have, excuse me, we do have Henry Ohm here as one of our internal auditors. He is here to answer questions and speak on behalf of the company. We'll try to keep this in under 2 hours if we can. I'm joking. This will be quick. So we've come before you already to ratify last year's work plan, and you've approved that, as well as a contract amendment and a resolution to clarify and change the Finance and Governance Committee and its chair's role in oversight over the internal auditor. And the committee, the Finance and Governance Committee, did ratify this work plan, which is for fiscal year 1920. And then going forward, we did already speak with the committee about a new internal audit program framework. We're going to come back to committee. That was just an initial conversation because we've got some proposals. Management has some proposals about what to do in the summertime. This internal auditor's contract ends in June, and we'd like to look at a little bit of a different framework for the internal audit program. And then the internal auditor is also going to be giving you a whistleblower summary update, as well as, and it's not listed here, but the ER and the overtime audits should be coming in March or April. We're trying to set dates for those. So this is the proposal. The internal auditor, as you know, has a contract where every year they have to propose a work plan, and they did give us a comprehensive work plan, and there were quite a bit more items than were listed here. Not listed here are the PAC audit completion, the city core audit completion, the golf course audit completion, an IDEA warrant, and also payroll analysis and a credit card and travel reimbursement audit. Those were all proposed by the internal auditor in this fiscal year. And then there were 3 additional audits that were proposed beyond this fiscal year for purchasing, procurement, for accounts receivable and billings, and for payroll and HR. We did go to committee, and the committee narrowed down the scope of work to what is listed in the PowerPoint. So the whistleblower, hotline monitoring and investigations, the basic services, completing the payroll overtime audit, completing the environmental resources audit, And then there are also charges that we received from the internal auditor. They had an old work plan that listed the city core audit and the PAC performance audit. So they continued with that work through this fiscal year, and then we told them to put that on hold until the council authorized continuing with these or not. But it's staff's recommendation that these bills be paid because they were provided to us. They did do the work and they were provided to us before we told them to stop. So if you agree with the committee's recommendation and you approve all of those items as well as the charges that we've added on there, the total is $101,000. And we don't need funding allocated. We have the funding budgeted for that. So all we're asking is for your approval or any changes you might have to the work plan. I'll defer to Henry Ohm if you have anything you'd like to add or...
Thank you, Deputy City Manager. I just want to say that we did go through a thorough discussion with the Finance and Governance Committee. As you may know, when we first started this process, we conducted a citywide risk assessment process where we met with a number of different departments and as well as the certain council members to kind of develop a risk plan. And that plan was year 1, year 2, year 3. We presented that risk assessment plan to at the time it was the Fiscal Policy Task Force as well as City Council. And so we proposed in year 3 some of the additional work plans that were presented to Finance and Governance, but this is the plan that has been narrowed down by staff's recommendation as well as the Finance and Governance Committee. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about the other scope of work if it comes up, but what staff has recommended is what we have in place now for fiscal year 2020.
And that's it. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. And let me just double check. I don't think... And just to update it, okay, and it doesn't appear, Madam City Clerk, I have any speakers either, right? Just to make sure. Okay. So we have no speakers, and we'll call on Mayor Pro Tem, please.
I just want to thank staff for the work and for Mr. Ohm for coming and doing the work, and I would support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional members of the council like to speak on this item? Councilman Perillo.
Thank you to the staff, and thank you to the outside auditor. Have a safe trip back up north. And ladies and gentlemen, they've done the work. We have to pay the bills, but the Finance and Governance Committee thoroughly went through this thing, and I support this also.
And any additional comments by any other members of the council? So just as concluding remarks, as councilman and committee member of the Finance and Governance Committee, Perillo just stated, this has been vetted thoroughly, not just by the committee, but by the staff. We've had a lot of challenges here because initially, the whole thought of doing this, there's 2 parts of this. The first part was the whistleblower hotline, and that's consistent with the policy that Councilman Perillo was able to author and initiate and the council adopted, which is that people, if they sense or believe that there's wrongdoing going in the city or any kind of wrongdoing, that they can anonymously call a hotline and that this will be investigated independent of the city. And one of the conclusions of this whistleblower hotline, in essence, is that we haven't had as many calls, number one, as perhaps would have been anticipated. So that's number one. And number two, many of those calls don't even qualify to the point of even thoroughly investigating them. However, the whistleblower hotline is only one component of this work plan. The other component was also to take a look at various departments throughout the city. Many of those departments, like City Core, that's had a change in leadership, and it completely reorganized. The Performing Arts Center, which has a new contract, and that's completely gone in a different direction. And finally, the golf course, which also has a new contract, that it made further investigation in many of these areas no longer relevant, and so they were discontinued. And so with the recommendation of the city manager and his staff, we have a process now that I believe will well serve the city and I think, overall objective of making sure that some of the transgressions that took place in the past never happen again. So I want to thank the city manager once again, the internal auditors, and the city manager's staff for an excellent job, and also my colleagues on the committee and my city council colleagues. So this,
Mr. Mayor, if I could just, since you mentioned the hotline before and calling into the hotline, just for the record, to note that whistleblower complaints can also be submitted through the website as well as by email. It's not just a phone line.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Mr. Fisher. And the recommendation, of course, is that we ratify the internal auditor annual work plan. Do I have a motion to approve? Okay, so that was made by, let's just go ahead and give it to the committee member, Councilman Perrello, and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. The vote, please. Mine should say yes. I hit no. Do we have to redo it again? I'm sorry.
Let's redo it. Just.
I know. These small little buttons. Anyway. Okay. All right. Okay, there we go.
The motion carries 7-0.
All right. And that is the final item this evening. This meeting is adjourned.
Mr. Mayor, can we do a quick equipment check, please? I've had my request to speak button on since the January 7th meeting.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's because
does it show up or not?
Yeah, now it is.
I'll save
Now
my
that the
comments for
meeting's
the
over,
next
it is
council
showing
meeting.
up.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. In fact, it's on even before the meeting starts. Anyway. All right. This meeting is adjourned.